I was so fortunate when I got into real estate to work for the broker I did. Her name was Betty. My broker in charge had been in real estate for a really long time, long before I had gotten into real estate. In fact, Betty got into real estate when there was no test to get into real estate. Can you imagine that? And I said, really? How did that work? And she said, well, in the day, what we did was we went down to the flower and feed store where they had the hunting licenses and the fishing licenses, and that's where you got your real estate license. And I said, there was no test? And she said, nope. And I said, well, you're a broker. Was there a broker's test? And she said, nope. She said it was $3 to be a salesperson and $5 to be a broker. And she said, I had $5 in my wallet that day, so I've been a broker ever since. Now, don't think for a minute, with her lack of formal education, that she didn't know her way around a real estate deal and that she didn't know the difference between right and wrong. She was an absolute tyrant when it came to training. The first 6 or 8 months in the office, we weren't allowed to go out on listing appointments without her. She scrutinized everything and went through everything. And her partner in the business, a fellow by the name of Al, he was a property appraiser. And if we were fortunate enough to get a listing appointment, Betty was going to be going with us, but we had to prepare our CMA and our opinion of value and sit with Al. Now, what was required, and this is the way Al taught us, we had to do a comparable approach to value, which we refer to as the highest price analysis, and we had to do a cost approach to value. Then we had to write a summary report and identify with which one of those strategies we felt was most applicable, and then come up with a value. Then we had to take our evaluation, and we had to sit with Al and we had to go through all of our comparables. And he really, really grilled us on this because he wanted to make sure that when we sat in front of the seller that we knew what we were talking about, that we were really well informed, because that drove up our value and really added depth and weight to our opinion of value. So Betty had us practice our listing presentation. Al had us practice our CMA. Betty made sure everything was ready to go, and Al made sure we were qualified to have that discussion about price. When we got to the house, Betty would scrutinize everything we did. And then she would use this as a field training exercise. When the appointment was over, we would go and have a coffee, and she would grill me on all the things I did or didn't do or what I should do next time to be even more effective. The point was I had really good sort of hands-on training from a street perspective. Today, when I see real estate salespeople do a CMA, I get frustrated. I get frustrated because their idea of a CMA is running off some data sheets on the MLS and creating a collage on the kitchen table and expecting the seller to navigate their way through the complexities of that information and come to the exact price. And that's not how you want to do this. In fact, what I would do is set up a table. I'd have my subject property on the table, and I'd have my comparables and all the different features, and I would make the adjustments, and I would lay it out in such a way that even the seller, who doesn't do this every day, can walk through all of that information and come to the conclusion of where they need to price their house. I don't want you to sit across the table and say, this is what your home is worth. What I want you to do is say, let's take a minute and discover what your property is worth. I've got lots of data. We can go through this together, and I know we can pick the exact price we need to get you as much as we can, but still get that property sold. So when we talk about comparables, we're looking at listings and sales. We want to look for the properties that have sold most recently, within the last 6 months, let's say. Now, if you can't find a similar property that has sold recently, then if you have to go back further, like a year, then you may very well have to make adjustments for time. But if you're looking for something to add to the accuracy, the more recent the sale, the more valuable the data. The second thing is you want to try to stay inside the subject neighborhood. You want to stay about a half-a-mile radius around the subject property. And we want to make sure we watch for dividing lines on neighborhoods, because prices can change from one side of the street to the other or one corner to the other. And we want to make sure that if you can't find a similar property in a local location and you have to go outside of the area, then you may very well have to make adjustments for location in your price. But let me put it to you simply. The property that has the least amount of adjustments, that is most similar and has sold most recently, is going to be your best comparable. Now, the next thing we want to look at is solds. And when we look at solds, we want to make sure we check the history on the sold. Because sometimes a property goes through 2 or 3 real estate agents and through a series of cascading price reductions until the last agent who gets it sold. But then that last agent, of course, he says, like, I sold it in 2 days for 110% of value. Look at me, I'm a hero. The reality is that property had changed through 3 or 4 different real estate agents and had been on the market for 18 months. What I want you to do is make sure that the seller doesn't point out to a property and say, that one sold quick and look how much money they got. I need you to be able to say, well, let's take a little look at that property and let's follow the history back. It had actually been on the market for 18 months. So I want to make sure that you're really well equipped to answer the questions. You want to take a look at how much houses are selling for in relationship to the asking price. That'll give you an idea what the list to sell ratio is. And why that's important, because you'll find the closer the asking price is to the sale price, the shorter the days on the market are. So this is something you need to bring to the attention of the seller. If they ask more, they're going to be there longer, and you need to be aware of that. And then, of course, we need to take a look at, when we're looking at our subject properties, lot sizes, amenities, time, and we got to make adjustments accordingly. Now, the last category we need to look at are expireds. Now, expireds are the properties that people were excited about selling, they put them on the market, and they failed to get the property sold. And it's usually a byproduct of price, number one. The listing agent wasn't persuasive and didn't have enough research and didn't have enough information for the seller to make the right decision. And secondly, the other thing we find is a disproportionate amount of expired listings by discount brokers and limited service brokers, because these guys are always looking for a way to do less and do less advertising, less marketing, and they're just hoping that the MLS system will be strong enough to sell the property without them spending any money on it. So again, we end up with properties that might have sold if they had been advertised and marketed effectively, or they got the price wrong. And in your presentation later on, you want to make sure that the seller understands what you're going to do differently than the people who didn't do that stuff, so they really see value in what you're doing from a marketing perspective, and they're confident you can get it done, and they're excited about having you do it. Now, active listings is the next category you have to look at. These are the properties when somebody is out shopping for a home, they're going to look at, as well as your listing. And that's how people buy things. They look around to figure out what do they like the best, what offers the most for the least, and that's usually the property that attracts their attention. So this is an important category. We need to look at everything that's for sale, and we need to take a look at your listing and figure out where the sweet spot is. If we put it on the wrong side, then of course what ends up happening is we sell everything south of it. And if we're too far south, then we may very well end up selling it for less than we should. So we want to get it just right, but this category is very important. Now, what I want you to think about it this way. There's really three categories. We have the properties that have sold, and the closest one right now in terms of time and location is the most accurate comparable. Then we have on the other side, we have the properties that are very similar, but they didn't sell. And in the middle, we have the properties that are for sale right now. This is the stuff people are looking at when they're looking at your listing. So you need to say to the seller, let's take a look at these properties and let's figure out the exact spot to place your property on the market so that we make it very attractive, we draw the attention, and the objective here is to end up with more than one person who wants to buy it, so we can create that auction effect, that bid up effect, where people start to pay more than what we expected for market value.